In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. Yvette Carnell is wrong. Black people did not build America. I've heard Yvette Carnell say many times, slaves built the United States. She knows that is not true, but she says it anyway because it is just another one of her deceptive methods of stoking collective sentiments of injustice among descendants of slaves to garner a support base for herself. Because she knows it is not true, she is intentionally lying to her listeners. The United States is divided by caste, race, and gender. There are two castes in the United States. They are one, those with capital, and two, those without capital. Each caste is in turn divided by many races and classes, and within each race and class, each member is driven by an inherent passion for distinction. For each person, the amount of capital acquisition in their lives is their sole mark of distinction and defines their self-worth as being higher or lower in the social hierarchy. Real political activity in the United States is driven by those with concentrations of capital. You can easily know the difference between the two castes. Members of one caste is always asking for monetary support, and the other caste exercises the authority to say yes or no. Yvette should know that Congress and state legislatures are the arenas wherein real political activism is played out on a daily basis. She should know that Congress is powered by concentrations of capital, and thus Congress belongs to those who possess concentrations of capital. Yvette should know that the phrase, "we the people," was not and is not meant to convey a meaning, everybody is in the house. That phrase does not mean inclusivity. What Yvette should know is that the phrase, "we the people," means only some people are in the house. It is a phrase of exclusivity. It is that singular group that grows capital by means of the labor of others. Thus, all others are but laborers for the caste, "we the people." The laborers are not "we the people." They are just laborers and no more. Token identities mean nothing to "we the people." The possession and control of capital is the qualifying identity of those who consider themselves to be "we the people." The rise of industrialization and the importation of African slaves into the United States are the two most glaring examples of capital concentration and its complementary hand, political activism. Both demonstrate how those who control concentrations of capital also determine who governs, societal laws, and policies. Those who govern execute the laws for them. Thus, it is concentrations of capital that has not only paved the course of United States history, but has also paved the course of world history for the last 5,000 years. If a group does not have a concentration of capital, then that group cannot engage in real politics, because real politics involves power. Political activity is not, and I repeat, is not an act of voting, when in fact candidates are predetermined by groups that control concentrations of capital and the power that grows out of that concentration of capital. And since political activism determines who gets what, when, where, and how much, then it is those who possess and control concentrations of capital who are the only ones who are politically active. Yvette cannot therefore be politically active because Yvette does not have or control a concentration of capital, and she does not have power, and nor do descendants of slaves. Yet, she should know that, but she doesn't. The fact is that we, descendants of slaves, and our ancestors, who were slaves, did not build America. The truth is that we were forced by physical violence, threats of violence or intimidation, or generally what we call extortion, to work for the people who did build America with our bodies. For example, answer these questions. Is the mule that pulls the plow that cuts a furrow in the earth across a field farming? Or is the plowman who whips the mule to pull the plow farming? Likewise, is the bricklayer who is paid a daily wage to stack bricks, one brick atop another, the builder of the building? Or is the architect who forms the intent in his mind to build and who then designs the building, the builder? I think you know the answers to those questions. Please tell Yvette Carnell, because she does not understand this fundamental relation between concentrations of capital, slaves, and descendants of slaves. Here is some history to help her. We say that Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid of Giza, but we never say that the laborers and slaves built the pyramids of Giza. Our chests swell with pride at the thought that a Pharaoh, Khufu, was the builder, and we do so because he was black. We even buy t-shirts with his name on it. We make a dead Pharaoh a popular celebrity to worship, but we dismiss the laborers and the slaves. They are forgotten people, like our ancestors who picked cotton are forgotten. The fact is, Khufu was a capitalist. He owned Egypt. The fact is that all others were his laborers. The fact is that only Khufu was a free man in ancient Kemet. The fact is that all others served him. It is a major contradiction in the narrative of descendants of slaves to at once abhor their repression and at the same time admire Khufu and dismiss his laborers and slaves as worthless. The laborers and slaves were people like us. With very few exceptions, history makes no mention of the drama in their personal lives. Historians gloat over capitalist empires and their wars, both past and present. But they dismiss the poor, who have been extorted by capitalists down through the past ages, 7,000 years of written history. The truth is that most historians promote Bronze Age mythologies, one of which is the divine right of kings or the right of capitalists to rule the world. One cannot say that because one labored for another that his or her act of labor qualifies him or her to be named the builder. Thus, slaves did not build any part of America. On the contrary, slave energy was converted into power and then harnessed like any other renewable energy to drive the engines of America. Black power was ruthlessly exploited to build wealth for that caste who called themselves we the people and the heirs of the architects of American society. America is pure capitalism on earth as it is conceived by them in their minds. The United States Constitution established capitalism to be the basic economic premise of society. For example, the federal government profited from the importation of African slaves. Let me quote from the Constitution. The importation of such persons, a tax or duty may be imposed, not exceeding $10 for each person, end quote. All economic markets in the original 13 colonies and later states conformed their markets to the basic premise that the purchase and development of private property is a speculative investment in future capital growth. Supreme Court Justice Marshall wrote the court opinion in the famous case Johnson versus McIntosh that all land westward and southward of Washington, D.C. was the property of the federal government, and that indigenous peoples were henceforth only tenants at will and could not sell their own land. Marshall argued the right of discovery by Christian people, by the popes and kings of capital, or we the people, to justify the common law crime of property theft. But Marshall was only echoing mythologies of 5,000 years of Bronze and Iron Age empires. America's capitalist view was formalized in ancient Greece and England. Aristotle, John Locke, and Adam Smith may be considered to be the founders of the American economic order. First, Aristotle, in his book Politics, stated concerning private property, and I quote, "What is common to the greatest number gets the least amount of care. Men pay most attention to what is their own," end quote. And later, John Locke, in his book Two Treatises of Government, assumed that private ownership of land or any particular male, female, or thing is derived from the labor a man puts into land, people, or things to develop for commercial usefulness. Conversely, Locke believed that if there be no labor and development on open land, people, or things, then one cannot claim it to be his or her private property, nor even claim self-possession. Given that assumption, land or people, like convicts in prisons, are open to be claimed by those who will stake a claim on them and develop it or them for useful, profitable purposes. And finally, capitalism was set in granite by Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations, wherein he invoked the power of the invisible hand of the marketplace to drive product consumption. He did not invoke the whip which Jesus used to drive the money changers out of the temple. The rich do not believe that they should be taxed or subject to government extortion, since they believe they create jobs and employ people. Thus, they view the economic system as being dependent on them. They do not perceive themselves to be owned nor developed by anyone or any institution. Only slaves or those subject to extortion or taxation are owned and developed as capital assets to be used as speculative investments for future capital growth. Yvette should know all of that, but she doesn't. She should know that socialism will not succeed in America. Socialism will not end capitalism any more than defeating Hitler defeated hate. But capitalism will end. And you might wonder, well, how? Why? The answer is that capitalism will end by 1,000 destructive feedback loops ranging from physical and emotional injury to billions of people, to the global destruction of thousands of ecosystems and habitats we all live in and depend upon. Capitalism is destructive. Capitalism, by its very nature, rationalizes unnatural Bronze Age hierarchies, which normalize social conflict. Capitalism is a man-made storm. It is a storm which engenders conflict between individuals and nations. It is a storm which unleashes destructive forces which run against the long-established cycles of nature, and in so doing, it causes fallout between it and the whole organic world. And the organic world is now losing in the face of it. But ironically, the loss of the organic world is the destruction of capitalism. Capitalism eats away at nature. It eats away at nature like a cancer. And like anyone with untreatable cancer, capitalism will end. It will die. It will die like Hitler died in a hole in the ground with a bullet in the head, or like Mussolini. It will be hanged upside down for the whole world to see it for what it was, an anomaly of thought. But what will not die is the human nature that conceived capitalism, conceived it in the one and only wonder of the world, the human mind. Yvette Carnell should know that, but she doesn't. Yvette Carnell should grow up, but she probably won't. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.